Good morning, everyone. And I'm so pleased that you're here joining us today with the spring edition of the Commercial Vehicle Business Summit. Just to give you a little background, the CVB Summit was initiated in 2021 as a virtual opportunity to connect people during a time when there wasn't a lot of traveling. But the entire goal was to connect people throughout the whole ecosystem of commercial vehicle life cycle. And it really had never been thought of that way. There was a lot around the actual vehicles. There was a lot around individual segments of mobility and autonomy and electric vehicles, but no one had actually gotten together and talked about what the business actually was. And so this is our fifth edition, and I'm really proud of how we've attracted a really interesting group of diverse specialists in their area that all build on support and expand and innovate in the commercial vehicle business space. And so I'm excited about our event today. In the spring, we always focus on kind of a general theme. And then in the fall, we always pick a theme. So our general theme for the next 2 days is what we're calling future ish. And we're using that kind of, quirky little title because today it is just really, really difficult to know exactly what's going to be happening next. We have navigated through a couple of really difficult years that stressed our ability to be agile, to be able to break rules and kind of make our way through that I think has really invigorated a lot of the parts of the industry and of our personal lives, honestly. So now how are we going to pick up that stimulation that we've done and continue that through what is going to be a very unique opportunity of change? You know that quote, the only thing that stays the same is change, right? Well, it's almost like the sun and the moon and the stars have all aligned now that are driving us down a path of change, whether we are interested in that or not. And I think that what I hope that our conversations will help everyone with is to help them leverage opportunity rather than try and control the downside. I think that would be a mistake today. And so, as you're looking at what is going to be a really challenging path, kind of rough, kind of jagged, trying to get through the changes as the ecosystem leverages technology, quite frankly, to do more, be more, collaborate with each other more. But initially, it's going to be running into each other, right? So I think that's going to be very interesting. I was really pleased to hear that a number of you attended our networking session, an opportunity to kind of speed date and meet folks. We've got another one at 11:55 Pacific time or 2:55 Eastern, and then one again right after closing. We also kick off tomorrow morning with a half an hour of networking. We would really advise you to see who you can meet. Certainly, you're going to hear some great speakers today. I spent last week at ACT, the Advanced Clean Technologies event. You could see how that's grown, how many OEMs, traditional OEMs, are doing new things, and new OEMs are doing new things and new products and services. I'll leave you with one thing that I learned over the last couple days. I was at a forum in Silicon Valley, and I did not ever realize that um, airplane tires are not sold. The tire companies are charged by the takeoff and the landing. And to me, that kind of sets the stage for where we're going to head now. I'm going to bring in my favorite data person and analyst, Andrew Wrobel from Escalent. Andrew, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me, Catherine.
Yeah, I guess I forgot to tell everybody I'm Kathryn.
Yeah.
I think everybody knew that. So, Andrew, you've been busy. I know that you presented at the National Truck Equipment Association event and really turned a lot of heads because you have some new data that you're working with and you have some kind of a format that you use to help people understand adoption. And you're going to walk us through here this with some new
Yeah, yeah,
updates. Yeah,
absolutely. The goal is today to hopefully help set the stage for the rest of the conversations and really frame what we see happening in the industry. Uh, just reading headlines, you would think that electrification is the only technology moving forward and everything is great, everything's moving forward, and that's the only direction that we're going to move. But there's a lot of buts that are going to come out. One of the big ones being use case, so how the vehicles are used, and geography is the other big one, where they're being used. So I've got this picture up to kick it off of a snowplow going down the freeway. I
makes
know
me
if
so
you're in
happy I
California,
live
you're not
in
going to know what
California.
this is.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm sure.
maybe after this year you will, but um, yeah, this is one of the use cases that is difficult to transition to battery electric. Um, and another example, city of New York, they bought several electric refuse trucks, and refuse for several years now has been talked about as a great opportunity for battery electric. You know exactly how far it's going to drive. The use case is great. You know what the route is. It returns to the same base every night, so you can recharge and you're ready to go for the next day. So the city of New York bought, I think it was 5 or 6 electric refuse trucks. Problem was, wintertime came and they require their refuse trucks to double as snowplows during heavy snowfalls.
Oh,
Well, they quickly sidelined those trucks and had to buy an additional 5 or 6 traditionally powered refuse trucks so that during those snowfalls, they'd be able to keep the roads clear. A snowplow's use case 24 hours a day operation when it's heavy snow. And when they're pushing heavy snow, they've got to be able to do that, and they're operating in cold weather, which all of those are not in favor of electric vehicles. However, we don't think that electric vehicles are a non-starter. They very clearly have viable opportunity, and they support a lot of use case, especially ones that drive a lot of volume in certain segments. One of the things we'll talk about as we get further on in the presentation is where they make sense and why they make sense, which vehicle classes, body types, vocations, that sort of thing. But if we aggregate it all together, right now our forecast is looking at about 20% zero emission. So that's fuel cell electric and battery electric vehicles in 2030.
and and
Uh,
and that's very different than the public statements that have been made, correct?
that's very, very different. Yes,
That's about
yes. Than
50% of what that some of the more enthusiastic folks have been claiming,
the,
correct?
Yes, yes. I've seen as high as 40, 45%
Yeah,
in 2030 for zero emission vehicles. And just to clarify, this is class 2B through class 8. So this is that's what we're qualifying today as commercial, understanding that there is a lot of commercial opportunity in the class 1 and 2A space. Um, but we already kind of know where what the
yes,
use case is and how those are operated in the lighter vehicle classes. It's the heavy vehicle classes where the big question marks come up of
right.
how does it fit, where do they fit, when do they fit,
Yeah.
type situations.
What can they do? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so Kathryn mentioned the Advanced Clean Transportation Expo that was in Anaheim last week. Yeah, last week was a really great event. A lot of good product there. A lot of product that has already been shown several times at several different shows. So there wasn't a whole lot of new that came out of there. The one the one big takeaway that I had from the show, it was a more of a read between the lines type situation than it was explicitly shared. Utilities are going to be one of the big holdouts moving forward for zero emission vehicle adoption. Uh, Hearing there was a utility there from California that was on one of the panels, and anytime they were asked a question about what was happening, or someone would bring up a good point towards how the utilities could restructure, the response was always, "We're thinking about this. We want to do that. We're looking into this. We're attempting this. We think that's a good idea." There was no discussion of what they are doing, what the plans are, how they're going to support all of this, which is a big problem. I was talking to a Daimler truck employee who does customer support. So for all of the e-mobility products that they sell, if a customer needs support either with infrastructure or planning how many and what vehicles to deploy, he was there to help them. And he said the biggest problem they have is utilities. They'll have a fleet that wants to add 5, 10, 15 electric trucks. They scope out exactly how much power they need to draw from the grid. They go through all the permitting process with the local governments. They reach out to the utility to get the power run, and the utility either says no, or they say, "Yeah, we'll look into it and get back to you." And there's
Andrew,
no
at the event
quick
that
way
I
about
was
it.
just at the event that I was just at, they were
Yeah,
saying 2.5 years schedule. That was what the fleets that they were talking to. Two and a
yeah.
half years. Okay. What year will that be?
Well, and so that's and we'll talk a little bit in more detail about the advanced clean fleet rule that California just passed earlier this month. Um, there's a lot of opportunity within that rule, and there's a lot of risks. It's starting to force that electrification as early as next year. Um,
Did you actually read all the pages yet? Or are you
I
only
haven't read through all of
130?
the pages. I've
You're
read
100.
just about every summary that exists out there, and I'm working my way through the entire thing at this point. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack within that rule. So when we look at zero emission vehicle growth, this is classifying more in the light commercial 2B and 3, and the medium commercial 4 through 7 classes. a, a lot of what I saw even 5 years ago was that there would be a hockey stick event at some point, that all of a sudden electric vehicle sales, production, adoption would just shoot to the moon, just all of a sudden. We're not really seeing that yet. Even beyond 2030, we're not seeing a real hockey stick effect. Um, a lot of that is driven by product availability, how it's being rolled out, where it's being rolled out, but also what use cases, what vocations those products are serving. So we're still seeing a moderated, uh, generally steady ramp out into at least 2030 and then beyond 2030 as well. So if you've
Here's
attended
your
this
famous slide.
It is. If you've attended this in the past, you've likely seen this slide. And Kathryn mentioned early on talking about the ecosystem of commercial. It's a fantastic way to look at it. We break that down even not just from a commercial vehicle landscape, but even going as far as powertrain. This is how we look at the ecosystem of adoption for the future of powertrains. There's 6 main categories on here. There's no order to these categories. The point of this is that all 6 of these buckets, the points that are on here, they all have to work together to advance it. It's not just California saying, here's the new ACF rule, we're going to have a whole bunch of electric vehicles on the road. There's a lot of other aspects that have to be considered moving in there. So what I'll kind of talk about now is more of an update to where we were last time. From a product availability standpoint, there have been quite a few new vehicle introductions even this year. Most of those coming in classes where we've seen lighter adoption. Class 4 and 5 have been some of the lighter classes as far as product availability for zero emission vehicles. And we've got quite a few new ones that are out there in the space. Isuzu with the N series that's coming. Startups, we have Bollinger that's coming with theirs. Exos was at ACT Expo with their Class 5 walk-in van, we're seeing a lot more products being launched in this space. Where we're yet to see a lot of product launch is from the big three OEMs. So GM, Ford, and FCA, or Stellantis, or Ram, or however you want to refer to them at this minute. Uh, the, all of those OEMs that make up a vast majority of the middle of the medium duty segment, they're a little bit behind the curve. Well, behind the curve, I guess you could say, from a product availability standpoint. We expect that to change over the next few years, especially with the ACF rule here from California.
And Andrew, one of the things that I've heard just from the street, so to speak, is that it's becoming more and more clear to the OEMs that the retail opportunity is softening, and the production lines are going to be slowly transitioned into doing more commercial. I don't know exactly what the makeup will be of the different, ICE versus alt fuel, but one of the things that I did notice at ACT, and I guess we should talk about it under the OEM part of it, is that there's also a whole lot of focus now on hydrogen and fuel cells, correct? That was, to me, there was a lot more about that there at ACT than I've ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is more interest, I would say, in general, in hydrogen as a fuel. Um, there's still a lot of problems around that, especially for infrastructure.
Mhm.
Uh, Last year, the hydrogen discussion was around the lines of 5 years for infrastructure. We're 5 years behind Europe, and Europe is just about ready for it. I remember the year before, it was the same thing. We're 5 years away. This year, we're still 5 years away. So it seems like a perpetual problem that we need. There needs to be investment around the infrastructure
Well, I
in
guess
order
that's
to
kind
build
of
that
what
out.
I saw more this time. It was more leaning in and accepting that somebody's going to have to do it, right?
Yes, yes. Well, and there is a lot of opportunity for hydrogen, especially at the ports.
Mhm.
So the ports are looking into hydrogen, providing hydrogen fueling for uh, regional haul, long haul trucks that are in and out of the ports. Um, just they're also looking into CNG, RNG,
Right.
uh, all sorts of different fuels, not just the California ports, but Port of Georgia, and all of the East Coast ports as well.
Remember in the fall at the NTEA's executive summit, Navistar talked about being converting 50% of their medium duty diesel trucks to hydrogen. Like, the fact that you can use hydrogen as a fuel for the same basic design makes a big difference in getting to something new faster, right?
Yeah. So that's hydrogen ICE, or H2 ICE,
Right.
as it's being referred to right now. Is There's a huge opportunity for that, that we see pending infrastructure, but
Um,
we're assuming that the infrastructure will come to support this, because battery electric vehicles are not the only solution for the future. Clearly, our
I hear
forecast
that
shows.
theme throughout today and
Yeah,
session. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, but one of the big things when new technologies come into the space, or new opportunities come into really any automotive space, light vehicle, commercial vehicle, off highway, we look at production in place, and the idea that something that's already being produced, if you can modify that to meet the new goals or the new needs,
Right.
it's a much faster ramp to acceptance than producing something brand new. So if you can take an existing internal combustion engine, convert it to run on hydrogen, CNG, propane, biodiesel, whatever alternative fuel that you want to pick out there, there's a lot. It's a lot faster to get that into the marketplace for adoption than it is to introduce something completely new.
Yep. And propane and CNG have been around doing that for quite a while. So
Yeah.
there'll
And
probably
now
be
with
a little more focus on that as well, right? I would think.
Yeah, yeah. And now with RNG, what's been talked about, and I had this discussion again at the ACT Expo. RNG with a hybrid is
So
not a
you tell
plug-in
the
hybrid, just a
audience
full
what
hybrid.
RNG is, because I had to ask you that, remember?
Yeah, RNG is recycled natural gas or
And where does that
renewable
come
natural
from?
gas. Uh, Garbage dumps
That's
primarily.
right.
So there's a lot of off gas that comes out of there, and instead of burning it or just letting that release into the atmosphere, you can capture that and run a vehicle on it. Um, Pricing conversation I had with someone at the ACT Expo, generally about 50% cheaper than diesel right now, and about what does it be about 60% cheaper than hydrogen today.
Does it need
Um,
to be compressed like, yeah.
yep, yep.
Wow.
Um, But if you take the RNG and you add a hybrid, the RNG engine, and you add a hybrid behind it, uh, that provides better well-to-wheel emissions than a battery electric. So, battery electric, there's a lot of emissions that are produced during the production of the vehicle, the
Right.
production of the battery, the production of everything that
The
you
mining of
don't
the lithium.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So there's a lot of opportunity there. Um, One of the so Hyliion is a company that's offered this for a while, a few years now, on the Peterbilt 579. They would take a Peterbilt 579 as it came off the line with a Cummins X12 natural gas engine, add their hybrid system behind it, and you could run a CNG or RNG uh, truck long haul, long distances. You get about 500 miles range. Really unique solution, but the 12-liter natural gas engine just didn't support the use case. So it really hasn't seen a whole lot of adoption because of that.
Mhm.
Well, now with Cummins fuel agnostic strategy, they're offering a 15-liter natural gas engine that will meet the needs of the use case that the truck is designed for and has the potential to see more adoption in the space.
So is it time to tell everybody about the guy from Cummings presentation at ACT?
Yeah, for which
Which
one?
soul chart following?
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
so that was Dana. Yep, that
Oh,
was the guy from Dana.
okay.
At ACT Expo, the CEO of Dana Incorporated got up, and his first slide was the about the first electric vehicle that was in the late 1800s was produced. Was very quickly adopted in small numbers. New York City had a fleet of I think it was 15 or 20 taxis, all electric, but it only lasted for a few years before it fell out of favor for the ICE. And the biggest reason, there were three major drawbacks. Charging infrastructure was one, vehicle acquisition cost was another, and range was another. Sound familiar? It's the same issues that we're experiencing today, some 150 years later. We still haven't figured out those same issues. We're getting closer, and the more vehicles that we deploy, the closer we'll get, hopefully, fingers crossed, hopefully. But we're still going to find that electrics will not meet all of the needs of the industry, and that goes into fleets. Fleets turn over between 10 to typically turn over about 10 to 15% of their fleet each year. Um, Depending on the year, it could be more, it could be less, but that's about average is in the 10 to 15% range. If we force more turnover in zero emission vehicles, so we start outlawing when vehicles can be on the road, which forces more turnover, there's risk to the economic growth because you're forcing fleets to spend more money that they may or may not have on new vehicle acquisition. Um, Also, if a fleet can't make one vehicle do the job that they were doing with one vehicle in the past, from a weight standpoint, they may have to move to two vehicles or may have to go up in weight class, which has different implications or could have different implications as far as driver qualification or finding a driver for it, um, as well as driver training in that space. Supply chain is a big one. I actually had a conversation with a lithium mining company up in Canada last week, and it what surprised me is it takes 10 to 15 years for a new lithium mine to open and start producing at maximum capacity. 10 to 15 years for that to start. We're not opening lithium mines at any alarming rate at this point. Uh, when do we run out of supply of lithium? Right now, I know OEMs are even working on the supply level to lock up, work with directly with the mining companies to lock up supply of lithium, because the mining companies don't care where they sell it. This company that I talked to, he said, I don't care if we sell it to a laptop company or an automotive company.
Right.
If they want to buy our lithium, we'll sell them the lithium.
That's right.
Um, their maximum capacity, they're targeting about 1.5 million vehicles that they would be able to support, light vehicles with smaller batteries. When we're talking about commercial vehicles, it's you can support fewer vehicles because of the larger battery requirements to meet the range requirements that exist. So that's one mine. If we've got, if we call it 20 million or so vehicles peak for North America, commercial and or across 1 through 8. If we need to convert all of those to electric, this is not looking globally. This is just looking here in North America. There's a lot of risk that's involved with how much lithium is there to support the
Right.
the future electrification.
For sure.
Utilities we kind of touched on a little bit already. There's a lot of potential problems that are here as far as when fleets will be able to get infrastructure installed and how they'll be able to get it installed. Um, Along the lines of this, though, there are OEMs that are thinking outside the box when it comes to vehicle charging infrastructure. Exos showed a charging trailer. It's a trailer that can be moved, but is meant to be parked on site at a fleet's site that has 5 chargers built into it. It's also got a 400 kilowatt hour battery, and it only draws 50 kilowatts from the grid, and each charger is rated at 50 kilowatts. And what that's designed to do is to smooth out the power requirements from the grid so that a fleet wouldn't have to get 400 kilowatts from the grid. They could stick with a more reasonable 50 kilowatts from the grid that would come in, charge the batteries when the vehicles aren't being charged. And when the vehicles are being charged, it would charge all 5 vehicles overnight and not draw more than 50 kilowatts at any given time from the grid.
Mhm.
Again, there's additional lithium that's required there. There's additional
Right.
other concerns with it, but nevertheless, it's a good solution until we can get short term, until we can get the grid figured out in that case.
Yep.
And then once we get vehicle to grid infrastructure up and running, because that's only a few years away, like it's been for a few years now. Once we get that up and running, the potential is there that if you have the power in the charger and you're not going to use it, and the grid needs it for peak demand,
Right.
you could potentially provide that, sell that back to the grid.
Correct.
Infrastructure kind of falls right in line with that. The assumption that we're making is that fleets, and this is based on all the discussions we've had with fleets so far, fleets will be using private infrastructure. It doesn't make sense, especially for the larger fleets, to have any reliance on the public charging network. Even as that gets more robust over time, it's still not, if you're relying on the vehicle to make money, you don't want to rely on the public infrastructure to make sure you can use that vehicle. You want to be able to control that.
Yep.
There are a lot of charging as a service companies that are popping up, including partnerships with legacy fueling companies like BP and Shell that help smooth out that acquisition for fleets and help them figure out exactly how much power they need from the grid, when they should be charging, how they should be charging, all of that strategy work. There are a lot of companies out there that are supporting that.
Yep.
And then the big one that we'll talk a little bit about today is a little bit more is regulations. Biggest regulation I think that we'll just jump into right now is CARB's new ACF, or Advanced Clean Fleets rule.
And CARB is the California um,
Air Resource Board.
that has been kind of leading the charge for decades on setting standards that may not be achievable.
Setting the standard and trying to clean the air.
Correct.
They have great intentions. Sometimes more aggressive than can be actually achieved. Um, so this the as I'm working through the rule, there's a lot that's coming through to me. Some of the big things, milestones are starting next year. And that doesn't mean that if you are a fleet in California or you use a commercial vehicle in California in 2024, you have to start moving to electric vehicles. What that means is that in 2024, high priority fleets, drayage, and government fleets are the first ones that need to start making the transition. And that's start making the transition, not move right away, but start making that transition into electric vehicles. For those high priority fleets and government and drayage, the goal right now is to have them all zero emission vehicle uh, by 2036. And this is for new vehicle purchases only. This is not regulating out what's already on the road. This is just saying if you are adding a vehicle to your fleet or your vehicle has reached, they have milestones in there for usable life, 800,000 miles or 13 years. There's a few different ways that they look at it for what a usable life of a vehicle is. If you are adding a new vehicle in 2036, you can only add a zero emission vehicle. So there will continue to be ICE on the road if this is able to be met. There are two important waivers that pop out in here that allow fleets to have exemptions. The most important one is use case. I already mentioned use case about 70 times today, and I'm probably going to do it about 70 more times. But the ACF rule says that if a zero emission vehicle does not exist to support your use case, you don't have to adopt right away. You can wait until a vehicle is available. The other one that's equally as important, that comes right from the last discussion about utilities, if there is a delay because of utilities, you can get an exemption. So if you are forced by this rule, the regulatory push into zero emission vehicles next year, but you can't get infrastructure until 2026 or 2027, you can get an exemption until that infrastructure is able to be installed at your location.
And that examination starts when a company has 50 or greater.
Right now, the focus is on vehicles, fleets of vehicles, of 50 vehicles or more, is where that starts. They are looking at targets for smaller fleets, 49 vehicles and below, but those would not start until, from what I've read, and the quotes from CARB, those would not start until 2030 or beyond for the smaller fleets. Most of this is focused on the large fleets or smaller fleets that are owned by one larger fleet. So if there's one fleet that owns 60 vehicles, but they support another fleet or they're partnered with another fleet of 40 vehicles, both of those fleets would have to fall under this requirement.
Hmm.
Um,
So fleet management companies?
yeah. Yep.
Oh,
If it's a fleet management company and there are a lot of, they have
yeah.
30 fleets of 10 vehicles, well, all of those vehicles are going to have to fall under this. So there's going to be I'm sure there's going to be some interesting ways to work around those potential problems. Um,
And
but
are those businesses in California or businesses anywhere but that are operating in California?
from my understanding, it's businesses in California.
So a bunch
Businesses in
more
California.
businesses moving out of California is what I predict.
That's
Yeah.
if you're on the border of Nevada and California, you may be moving out of state.
Um,
um, the other big thing that I didn't type on this slide, but the 2036 milestone is not for every vehicle sold in California, every heavy vehicle. For vehicles in uh, uh, regional haul or for long haul, those won't be until 2042 for that same only new vehicles sold can be zero emission vehicles. So there's a 6-year delay between that, these high priority fleets. And the focus for high priority fleets is last mile delivery or
Mhm.
delivery in general,
Right.
which is one of, and we'll talk about that again today, but that is one of the vocations, one of the use cases that is very easy to electrify, similar to refuse, depending on geography.
Right.
If you know what the route is that you're going to drive or what the potential route is you could drive throughout the day, it's very easy from that standpoint to be able to electrify. Some of the risks to that become, oh, we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll finish talking about the ACF rule first.
We have 10 minutes. Andy,
Yeah,
just
yeah, exactly. So anyway, one of the assumptions that we're making currently in the forecast is that this rule will be amended at some point before these targets are, uh, as we get closer to 2030, as we get closer to 2036, there will be amendments based on what is actually happening.
right.
My personal feeling is that California is, or CARB at this point, is also using this as a way to judge what is the major holdback. Is it product availability or is it infrastructure?
Right.
And we've talked about that for a long time, that what comes first, the chicken or the egg, the vehicles or the infrastructure.
Yep.
So will be interesting. This will be a good one that we'll continue to monitor at every single one of these events, I'm sure.
Yes.
So jumping into fleet size and use case, we talked a little bit about the large fleets of 50 vehicles or more. Well, maybe not large fleets, but the fleets for the ACF rule target. 62% of fleets in the US have 5 vehicles or less. That's the majority of fleets that exist in the country are very small fleets. They don't make up the majority of the vehicle population, but they make up the majority of the fleet population. These are the fleets that are going to struggle to meet those targets as they come out. That as they're pushed into electric vehicles, they're not a fleet of 100 where 10% of the fleet that they would turn over is 10 vehicles that they can try. If they turn over one vehicle, that's 20% of their fleet that they have to figure out. So these fleets are going to need the most support from the industry in order to meet those targets that come out.
Yep.
So here's a really cool slide that I love presenting this slide. I know Kathryn loves seeing this slide. This is based on Work Truck Solutions Convoy data. So this is directly pulled out of there. We made a little bit of modification to the vocations that you see on here, just to group similar vocations together and make the data a little bit more um, uh,
Absorbable.
meaningful, so that we
Yeah.
can, yeah, so that we can translate it a little bit better. But what's cool to me to see in here is uh, how the changes occur as far as what vocations are using the vehicles, how they might be using the vehicles as you get larger in classes. If we jump straight to class 6 and 7, uh, majority of those vehicles are cargo and delivery. Um, that is a great opportunity for battery electric, last mile delivery, delivery in general, goods transportation. As long as the weight works for it, it's a great opportunity. I saw a slide from, I think it was Peterbilt, talking about their electrification lineup, and the big thing they said is for cube out, which is where you fill the volume capacity before you fill the weight capacity, or reducing load, electric vehicles make perfect sense. But if you need the maximum load capacity, or you hit the maximum load capacity before you cube out, then you have uh, more risk to electrification, because batteries are heavy and they do you
Right.
require a lot of batteries to move the same amount of weight. So construction.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
So in
We're
the
down to
interest of,
about 6 or 7 minutes, so we need
yeah,
to.
so in the interest of time, I'm going to jump into
Right,
the next section here and just start talking about the classes specifically,
right,
where you can see what the vocations were on the last slide. What these next three slides do is really dive into, okay, we know what vocations are using them, but how are they upfit? If it's a vehicle that is upfit, how is it being upfit? Because that's what determines the ease of electrification for it.
exactly.
In class 2B and 3, we expect vans to make up about or to be about 45% battery electric in 2030. Um, Vans make up about 35 to 40% of the market for class 2B and 3. We don't expect much, if any, electrification activity in the truck segment, which is where the majority of the segment is. Why we're only seeing about 16% battery electric for the entire segment. For the trucks, how they're upfit, um, service truck, uh, there's potential there for it. But as you get further down the list, maybe a solid 25 to 30% of the market is going to struggle to, just based on upfit type, be able to move to battery electric, just based on packaging constraints, where the battery has to go. Right now, it fits between and on the outside of the frame rails, as well as what's required of the vehicle. How much EPTO usage will there be? What else needs to fit between the frame rails? How much
Right.
extra equipment do they need to fit there?
How much extra
Uh,
weight all that adds and takes away from the capacity, right?
exactly, exactly.
Oh,
So class 4 and 5 gets a little bit more segmented when you look at the body type, which is why this has been one of the holdouts for new vehicle introductions. Because beyond box trucks, which, yeah, box trucks make up a good 15% of the 15 to 20% of the segment, it's still not the majority. And the volumes there just don't support everybody's moving to battery electric right away, because all of these other body types are going to be harder to electrify right away
well,
than
and let's
box
also
trucks.
agree that when you have a very fragmented target of different things, it's harder for somebody to invest in the solution.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So this one, strip chassis, is almost 50% battery electric share, but
Mhm.
strip chassis total for 4, 5, 6, and 7 is only about 15,000 total units, 15 to 20,000 units total. So while strip chassis is a great opportunity, most of that is for delivery. It's walk-in and step vans.
Yep,
It is not a very high volume segment.
right.
So class 6 and 7, this should really be no surprise based on what we talked about with the vocation slide. Box trucks serve the cargo and delivery vocation very, very well. That's the majority of the segment, which is why we see this segment as such a big opportunity for battery electric. Well, there's really two reasons. One is that vocation and body type share. The other is school bus. So school bus makes up about 30% or so of the segment, and that is expected to be about 46, approaching 50% even. We see opportunity in school bus by 2030,
Right.
um, just based on use case. Again, it's driven twice per day, known route, usually shorter routes, and they're parked for the rest of the day.
Right.
So there's a lot of opportunity there. But beyond that, there's a lot of challenges in this class to be able to do it. And weight becomes a big concern here because, as I mentioned early on, there's driver requirements between 6 and 7 for your commercial driver's license that exist. If you're currently driving a class 6 for your delivery business and you need to go to a class 7 because of the weight requirements, there would be additional CDL requirements for your drivers.
Yep.
So,
Before we do this, I know
yeah,
this is our last slide, right?
yep,
So one of the things I wanted to mention is in the fall, we'll have to talk about how autonomy frames out to these different use cases.
absolutely, absolutely, and even get into the software-defined vehicle as well, because that's
Yep,
starting to become a big potential. I don't want to say disruptor, but opportunity in the
yep,
space moving forward.
yep. Well,
Um,
clearly from this, there's a lot of options, right?
and that's kind of the whole goal of. I know we spent a lot of time talking about battery electric and the opportunities and risks that are involved with that, but it's there's been a lot of comparisons over the years of other technology markets and how battery electric vehicles have the opportunity to be like these other technology markets, or like how that those transitions happen. But electric powertrains are not like a VHS versus Betamax discussion, or a Blu-ray versus HD DVD, where there's only one solution that can work in the long term. For commercial vehicles, it's part of the solution. The solution is not just zero emission vehicles, and it's not just battery electric vehicles. It's if the solution works, it will grow, it will be adopted, whether or not it's forced by the government. And the good solutions will work. We're already starting to see that happen. We wouldn't see continued growth in electrification if battery electric vehicles didn't work. But we also wouldn't see continued investment in internal combustion engine from companies like Cummins if that wasn't a solution that is still viable, even long term. Um, the other big one, not all solutions will work for all use cases. We've talked about use cases at length today. There are a lot of use cases throughout the industry, and not all of them can be supported by the same alternative fuel. Uh, the chart over here too on the right represents the alternative fuels that we have in our forecast right now. Propane really growing right now, as it will be offered as an OEM solution for school buses from Cummins. We have hydrogen coming in as H2 ICE or hydrogen ICE, and CNG, RNG continuing to be relatively stable. However, all of these fuels have opportunity in the future. As the infrastructures grow and as there's more adoption here, there's more opportunity for these moving forward.
I think that's a really great place to leave our audience. Andrew, I want to thank you. You're definitely my favorite person to kick off something like this because you have so much real information. And I know that that's what all we're trying to do is have some information that will help us make decisions, but decisions to move forward,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So thank you very much. And audience, I know you're pleased to see what Andrew brings us each time.